Welcome all, my beautiful unwells. I am Hanyo, your Demon Cinephile, and we are back with the third episode of The Vampire LESTAT, titled Toronto, because we are taking place in Toronto. That's a good opener, right? Isn't that a good opener? Yeah. I'm in an unfamiliar location and different settings using my original microphone without the nice fancy arms. I'm sorry this may sound a little different than normal, not like my original audio was anything spectacular to begin with. But this was a fantastic episode. Haven't got a chance to really sit down and talk about it. You know me, I'm bad with scheduling and I'm bad with life just getting in the way of things. Good for good and bad. But once again, this was a great episode. And also one that I love and also very frustrated about because I will say full judgmentals until the very end of the season. But I will admit I am very disappointed in the season. Not to say that the show has suddenly gone bad or I'm not enjoying myself. That is not the truth at all. It's just I was expecting a little bit more book accuracy. I was expecting a little bit more for the novels to be translated over because, well, I do love or like love, what would say, the Interview with the Vampire novel. It is not my favorite book. I love it. It's not my favorite book. The Vampire Lestat, though, is definitely one of my favorite novels of all time. It's one of my favorite books. I'm rereading it right now. You know, I'm trying to rush through it more than I normally do with the book I'm reading. I'm still enjoying it. Going back and reread paragraphs I've already read, wanting to revisit certain parts. It is one of my favorite novels. If I had to make a list of my favorite books I've ever read, it'd probably be in the top 5 or top 3. So yeah, I am disappointed in the show. Not to say that the show is bad. A lot of people get that confused. You can still like something but be a bit disappointed in it. I guess the way I'm trying to say this. Let's talk about the episode real quick. So the episode starts off. We are now in Toronto. We open up with this newlywed couple trying to pose for a perfect photos while our beautiful Brat Prince shows up and he is, you know, just being Lestat offering help with the photo, which was just all a ruse for him and Gabriella to grab dinner. And while they are driving to we do realize that Lestat is running a bit late because this is his first true sit down with Daniel, so they can actually have a true interview and not just the runarounds and the runabouts that Lestat's been giving him for the past 2 months. And I do like we get a little reference to the novels or more bringing into the novels how vampires work that. Yes, well, decapitation is one way to kill a vampire. This is from Dr. Farid. Decapitation is one way to kill a vampire in this world. It is not instant. Depending on how strong the vampire is, you have to wait a while for the preternatural blood to run out and become dead and useless. There was a study done in Budapest with 2 Class B vampires who were decapitated and did not perish for 2 hours. A vampire Lestat's caliber could survive 2 or 3 times longer than that. I'm curious about what he mean by Class B vampires. Does he mean like dumb, idiot, weakling vampires, like the vampires Louis kills this episode? Does he perish a few seconds, a minute after being decapitated? Because I know in the Vampire Armand, which is like the 5th book, 6th book, I don't know, the Vampire Armand is kind of like not technically part of the Vampire Chronicles. It's part of just New Tales of the Vampire subseries. Armand decapitates a vampire. I'm not gonna say who he decapitates, but she lasts a pretty good long time after being beheaded. And then there's the vampire Victorio, which is another good book. Victorio, who is just a mortal, gets a good hit on this one vampire and decapitates him, and all the other vampires are screaming, they're crying out, like, quickly put his head back to the body. But they fumble, they're too panicky, and the blood flows out, and he's just dead. So I do like this. I do really like them bring that back in because in the show they made the vampire super duper powerful, and in the novels you gotta be pretty old getting the special powers, but you still get the immortality and vice verse. Vampires are just super hard to kill. Fake Lestat has the herps, which is it It has nothing to do with the episode, but I love Daniel's reaction to it. I mean, you get a little information about Daniel, no, who when he was born, how he was made a vampire, not exactly after the interview from season 2, but like a couple of days or like a month afterward. What really caught my ears was when Lestat said Daniel led a brief life as a vampire. And this is, of course, Lestat's omniscient observation of the events of the season and next season, and possibly when we get to Queen of the Damned. So I'm wondering, does Lestat mean that Daniel's brief life as a vampire as current? Because he's only been like a vampire for like a year and a half or something like this. Or it's to is this to be that Daniel is not going to be with us long. Is Daniel fated to die? I don't know. So no. I mean, baby Jenks. Spectre predicted his death, but now going back and look at it, she was not really being used as an oracle, but more like just her spirit talking to Lestat. So is Daniel gonna die? Is he gonna be with us for not much longer? Because I know he just survived up to the end of the books. But also, if you are going to kill Daniel, then what was the point of killing off David Talbot? I mean, I know enough fans like David Talbot, but he does become the chronicler after Daniel. So if you are planning to kill Daniel off, why kill off David Talbot? You could just rewrote the character to your own liking. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? I want to talk about with this part next with Louis' side story, because Louis has an awesome side story here. But we do cut to Louis, and he is going to the Detroit house. He is going to the Detroit Coven, the Fang Gang, to take them out for the Talamasca, and of course to get his own revenge for Claudia. And I love Louis' demeanor. He's just so nonchalant, dispatching these meager fletchlings who mean nothing to him. We do get this scene where, not scene, but sequence where Louis floats up from the bottom of the house to the very top. And does Louis have the cloud gift? We do see he have telekinesis later in the episode, but does he have the full-on cloud gift? I mean, the cloud gift is supposed to be an extension of telekinesis. I'm not sure, or unless you want to count them as two separate things. I like to count them as two separate things. So, like, how strong is Louis? And how strong are the vampires overall? Because I'll talk about this at the end of the video, but the power levels in the show and in the books are kind of all over the place. And the books are a little bit better, but we'll talk about that later. So we finally get to the interview with the vampire, the interview with the vampire Lestat, and we get some great callbacks to the original novel with the opening. And also this whole sequence seems to be a remake to the original teaser that came out like 10 years ago because I'm looking at the clock. No, it seems like it came out like a year ago after the season 2 ended. So that was pretty cool. They keep bringing up Lestat's stutter, and it's really pissing Lestat off. And he's talking about it. He seems to actually have a breakdown for a second until he's just effing with Daniel. Oh, Daniel wants to be a bully information out of me. I'll be a bully too. We'll be spitting back and forth at each other. I'm very curious about the stuttering part, because why did they introduce that? Because in the novels, Lestat never had a stutter. As far as I know, like I said, I have not read all the books, but as far as I know, none of the other characters have had a stutter, so I'm not sure if this is a reference to something or reference to Sam Reed itself. But this also goes to my complaints on the show about them not doing more deeper influence, not more deeper flashbacks to Lestat's past, because if you are going to keep insisting he had a stutter, he's a stutter as a child, he stuttered at 9 years old, he stuttered at 16 years old, he stuttered until 29 years old, till he beat it out of him by working at the theater with tongue twisters again and again and again and again. You think that'd be like, you see more of that, you think we see some of that, we see Lestat improving himself, you think you will see Lestat working at the theater and Lestat becoming the Lelio that everyone fell in love with, the Lelio that Magnus became obsessed with. But we don't see any of that. Now I was looking up online, and this is just people talking. I did not look for any interviews with Roland James or somebody else from AMST, but it does seem like there was a big budget cut from this season to the last two seasons, or maybe they just didn't have the bigger budget to do the 18th century flashbacks, which, okay, I can understand. I just wish we got more of that because that is so much of the novel. A lot of the show, while it's referencing the novel and adapting the novel, it's not really pulling a lot from Lestat's past. Because how I envisioned the show, how I thought the show was going to go from watching the trailers, was that we would get little tiny snippets of Lestat's past throughout the season. But once we actually do sit down for the interview part, all that will come together. We will see everything, at least see what Lestat deems was worthy to see. Now, them not showing, not re-showing Lestat killing the wolves, that makes sense. We already saw that last episode. So I'm not mad we didn't see that again, but I am curious why we didn't see more of Lestat coming to Paris. We didn't see him getting the wolf coat, the wolf coat. And what we didn't really see a lot of Nikki, because we do see Lestat and Nikki meeting, and it is very sweet. It is very lovely. The relationship is a little different from the novel, because in the novel, how it works out is they were childhood friends. Nikki leaves to go to Paris for like a year or so. Like, it's been a while. He's been to Paris for a while. And then when they reconnect is when their relationship starts to blossom. Once again, Anne Rice never strictly says they are a romantic relationship, that they are boyfriends or whatever, but it's very clear. It's very clear after like the 5th page of them and their conversations that something romantic is happening. Here though, it seems that Lestat and Nikki, they came from Auvers. They knew each other. They were friends, but their relationship never really came about till Lestat moved to Paris. And I do love we could see on this version Nikki with this actor with Sam. They do have a fun chemistry together. But like I said, the failure, which I think calling this a failure is a little too early. We're still on episode 3. No, episode 4 is out. I just haven't watched it yet. We just don't see enough of them. We don't see enough. We see their meeting. We see them having lunch together. We see a brief snippet of them in bed. We see them arguing in their apartment. But we don't see, we don't see their conversations. We don't get to see it. There's so much missing. And while the stat just says, "Oh, my bipolar boyfriend," and Asid does in the post episode interview, he just says Nikki was unstable before becoming a vampire. We don't see that. We don't really get the sense of that. We don't get to see the sense of how unwell Nikki is mentally. As in the novel, like I said, I'm not a specialist in mental health. I'm not sure if Anne Rice was, and I'm sure if the writers who wrote the show was. But if you're going from the novel, Nikki seemed to be very depressed individual. He was a very nihilistic person who thought almost everything didn't really have any meaning. Even the violin he played didn't really have much meaning, and he loved the violin, but he was not perfect at the violin because he started playing it at such a old age, in which the show does give a little hint to, where he says, "I play like a tailor's son, does not play like a true violinist." And he was a very complicated young man because he loved Lestat. He loved being with Lestat, but he what's the kind of person you want to call Nikki? He was not happy unless he was suffering, and he wanted everyone else he was involved with to suffer with him. He could never fully be happy that Lestat was successful, that Lestat was always optimistic. He could not be happy that Lestat lost him into such a good actor in such a few short years. We never got to see any of that. Of course, we saw the sweetness, but we never saw the depression, or how the show puts it, bipolarism. Even Mama Hanyo, I've told her about the books, and she's watched a lot of season 1 and 2 with me on my constant rewatches. When she was like, "What's wrong with him? Why is he acting like this?" It doesn't come across what's wrong with Nikki. And like I said, I'm not sure, just because the show has budget issues, or they could not use those sets or whatever. But if the next season is still going to be more of the vampire Lestat, I do hope we get to more flashbacks between this relationship because while the actors do sell the emotion, the storytelling is very, very rushed. It's like it's one of my favorite episodes, but also episode I have so much issues with. Why do I have to feel? Apparently, that is based off Nikki, which listening to the lyrics now is very much close to Nikki, but I think it's to reference to all of Lestat's relationships and how they all kind of failed. Daniel's questioning eventually leads to the turning of Lestat, how Lestat was abducted and transformed by the crazed vampire Magnus. And Magnus is pretty cool looking in the show. Not close to the books, because in the books he was supposed to be like a very much older man who made himself a vampire. His face, because in the novel, the person becomes a vampire, they lose a lot of their coloring. So they lose a lot of their coloring, they lose a lot of scars, they lose a lot of age lines. So when Lestat sees the Magnus for the first time, his first vampire for the first time, he thinks he's looking at a mask, this weird hard mask of a face, and you can't tell it's a face until it starts moving, it starts speaking, it starts looking at you, moving his eyes. It's a weird description how Anna Rice describes her vampires. While I also love the show for doing its own thing, I do wish the older vampires start to look like him. We're not sure why Magnus looks the way he does in the show. I guess he's just super old and doesn't take care of himself. But I don't know. I think we've seen Armand. 516 years old, right? And he still looks pretty human except for his eyes and nails. I just hope when we get to meet Marius, he looks a little more ancient. So far, the little bit of him we see in the trailer, he doesn't look that much. He still looks pretty human. So, damn it. How Lestat frames him being abducted and made by Magnus is it's very fun. It's very poppy. Daniel sees trying like, no, Louis said it was a nightmare. When you told it to Louis, you acted like it was full on abuse. Was I there to correct Louis when he told you all that nonsense? No. When Magnus took me, it was beautiful. He was my find. He admired me. And of course, we get the song Your Biggest Fan. This is still one of my favorite songs that's been released so far. And it very much is a pop ballad of Magnus to Lestat is how Lestat envisions his turning was. And probably, maybe some of it is the truth, especially with Magnus acting like a full-on yandere for Lestat. like the little fun gesture he does when he's looking at Lestat's painting and you see the other blonde men string up to the ceiling. Beautiful, horrifying, gothic. I love it. Lestat skips over it's Daniel because most of Daniel's overview. Lestat and Daniel they skip over Lestat meeting the Paris Coven, the abduction of Nikki. Season 2 was mostly true because in the novel it wasn't just Lestat, it was Lestat and Gabriella who came to rescue Nikki, and it wasn't a full rescue. They were taken, and Lestat had to talk and bullshit himself out of being burnt on a pyre. I've seen that mostly happen. But then we get to the scene where Nikki is made into a vampire. Now, this is pretty close to the novel, except with the addition of Gabriella there. And this is Gabriella, not Gabrielle. Gabrielle was an apathetic bitch in the novel. And Gabriella in the show is a full-on monster. So she's taunting Nikki and begging Lestat not to do it. Do not do it, Lestat. You cannot make him a vampire. And we do get to see Nikki breaking down, yelling, cursing, throwing things at Lestat. Now, to be fair though, this isn't the full-on bipolarness we should have seen, because Nikki's reaction is full-on understandable, especially how he says, "You disappeared one night from our bedroom. Then you come back a month later with these changed eyes, with all this money, and you start doing all these weird things. You went to go see your dying mother, then you disappeared off a 6-story building. What is with you? Basic gaslighting that would drive anyone to monsterdom. And while the dialogue is different, it does pretty much go to how you think in the novels. Prior to the novels, Lestat is feeling pretty disturbed. He feels like he has broken Nikki. Then Nikki is going to die and suffer, and if they leave him, he will still suffer. So Lestat does one thing he has to do, or thinks he should do, and he makes Nikki a vampire. And it does not go well. They don't go on to the full scenes that they did in the book. We don't see Nikki being catatonic for the first several nights of his new immortal existence. We don't see that the only thing was able to draw him out of his gloominess was his violin and returning to the theater. We don't even get to see any of that. So like I said, this felt a little bit rushed, but we do get to see that scene from season 2 where they were at the theater, where Armand and Lestat were in the box, and they were speaking so lovey-dovey to each other. Now we get to see Lestat's point of view, where they are critiquing Nikki and his crazed way of playing. Where Lestat is like, oh, I don't want to be on stage anymore. Not because he dislikes playing the role, like it didn't make scene last season. He just doesn't want, he hates speaking Armand's dialogue. Which I guess in English, Armand's a pretty good director, pretty shit writer. That's why he gave full on writing credits to Sam when he eventually joined the coven. Then when Gabriella shows up, because we did not see Gabriella last time. Now Gabriella shows up, and she's asking the questions Lestat was asking in the books, like, are there older evils in the world out there besides you? Are there other blood drinkers across Europe? Is your maker Marius still alive? And this is very interesting because while, yes, Armand did spoke of Marius last season, he spoke of Marius to Louis. In the novels, there is a whole little subsection called The Vampire Armand. It is Armand telling, Lestat and Gabriella, and mostly just Lestat reading Armand's mind on how he was made a vampire, how he met Marius, how he was abducted, tortured, and brainwashed by the Roman coven. Armand has told most of this in the last season, but it was to Louis. We never got to see him tell it to Gabriella and Lestat, so I'm curious on how that difference was. He tell it to them the same way. I don't know. There's just these little interactions that, while not necessarily needed for the narrative, something I myself would personally like to see, because I just love these characters and I love watching them interact with each other. If this was a lesser show or I did not care for these characters, I wouldn't mind if they just skip these dialogue heavy scenes. And then we get the part we saw in the trailer where Nikki is playing, he stands up and he shouts to the audience, I give you the Theater of the Vampires, the greatest spectacle on the boulevard. Scaring the audience, freaking them out. Let's ask, like, he was dramatic as a mortal, he'll settle. Gabriella, no he won't. And then I think Lestat was supposed to say the same thing, but he immediately tracks with Lestat. Oh yes he will. I love you, Lestat. He just says up so abruptly. And I love Lestat's reaction. He's like, Jesus Christ. There's not enough room in this box for your desperation. Which is true. Like, when after the satanic cult of vampires broke up, and Armand is spiraling because he was under centuries of brainwashed dogma, and he is just begging Lestat and Gabrielle to take me with him. Please take me with you. I love you both. I'll be an excellent lover for you both. He is begging to be a part, to create a throuple with a mother and her son. Ouch. I get so sad, so desperate. And Lestat, he said in the show, he has no time for it. There's no room. There's desperation. We go to Nikki. We go to the apartment, and they're all there. Lestat, Armand, Gabriella, Nikki, and Nikki is full on spiraling. He's obsessing over this letter opener, and there's a fun reference to the novel where he says, I opened the letter for your mother 2 years ago. Now, if you know the novel, there's this point in the novel where Lestat and Gabrielle were in Cairo. She was hiding this letter from him, and he quirks out when she, brings it when she finally shows it to him. And going back to the show, Nikki is full on spiraling in, and like I said, I wish we got to see more of this because it would have been so much better for the narrative as a whole. But watching the show as it is now, as it is present, the actor who plays Nikki, I should have looked up his name before doing this. The actor who plays Nikki sells it. He sells the pain. He sells the manic energy. And of course, we got Gabriella not caring in the corner. Armand conflicted, probably more caring that Lestat is upset. And then Sam Reed just the pain he's able to express in his face and in his voice, it hurts. Like he is the emotional centerpiece of this episode, which he has been for most of the show because it is his show currently, despite the other characters being present. It's just the vampire Lestat. And he is just selling the pain, the other misery to seeing this man he loved just keeps deteriorating and deteriorating. It happens, Nikki. He finds the letter opener, and it's not the letter opener, it's something in the fireplace poker, and he chops his own hand off. He's playing with it. He throws into the fire, saying, I'm sorry, my hands are just too old for me. I want to serve the dark god of the wood just like all the other evildoers. Now, that is also another reference to the novel because in the novel, one of the vampires do make it seem that since they are evil beings, they must worship or come from the devil or some pagan monstrosity. And they do make a reference to, I want to say they do make a reference to Dionysus. Dionysus was the Greek god of the wine. He was the god of the vine, the grape vine. He was also the god of ritual madness and performances, if I remember correctly. Also, a lot of the other older vampires make themselves to be god of the corn, god of the crop, god of the moon. They use the word god before they ever use the word vampire. Break away real quick. Kind of funny that they give the vampires this weird time stop power, but since a lot of the older vampires thought they were gods of the crop, you think to give them more weather-based powers. I don't know. It seems like it makes sense to me. I'm not part of the showrunners though. But Nikki is spiraling. Nikki is falling apart mentally. Gabrielle leaves to go to coffin. Lestat knows what he has to do. He knows what is best for Nikki. He can't do it, but Armand can, and he describes how much he loved Nikki, how he fell in love with him the second he heard his pedestrian playing in the street. And even though he may felt like those words were performative, in the moment they were true, and he could only watch as Armand pushed him into the fire. He held him there with a fire poker. And there are some references to the novel, like the O-shaped moaning Nikki does, was something Lestat did in the novel during these moments of the dread of death, the dread of no heaven, no hell, just simply non-existence. And once again, I want to compliment the writers on the show because they are not doing one for one from the book. How they're able to mimic Anne Rice's writing, her dialogue. It's so hauntingly beautiful. You think this was straight ripped from the novel. How Lestat describes Nikki in the moment. How he describes the fire dancing on his skin, his spare arms, but he could not look at the bloody stump. And Lestat is crying blood. He is pouring his eyes out. And he has to stop the interview because he is having a panic attack. And I'm not sure if I talked about this. I do love the effect in the most part of the crying blood, because in the novel it's described to be a little bit more different, more pinkish blood, like it's blood mixed with real tears. But if we're going to comparison, I want to say True Blood did it a little bit better. They did the blood tears a lot better. The blood felt more tangible. It felt more real, more nasty, which contradicts with the beautiful nature of some of the vampires, which I think the show could have done a little bit different. I'm not saying they have to have a full bloody mess face when they cry, but you think the blood should linger a little bit, to contrast with the beauty. But yeah, Lestat has a full-on panic attack. He gets up, he chastises Daniel, saying, by saying, "I am not Louis. Don't say I never gave you anything." And he does talk about how he is a little disappointed that they are not as popular as he wanted them to, as he thought they were going to be, because they rented out this 8,000 seat venue, but he only got 2,500. And while yes, disappointing to an extent, it's not about getting access in seats. This isn't about streaming on Pandora or YouTube or Spotify, much as it is for the other band members. For Lestat, this is about expressing himself, finally putting his music out there and being the performer he's always wanted to be. This is Lestat wanting to be Lestat, the truth, the clown, the brat, and the performer. Gabriella wants to join with Lestat, and I forgot to mention because it's one of the weirdest parts of the episode. It's one of the parts where the show tries to go full comedy, and it didn't really work. Gabriella, she's subtly flirting with Gustav or Yava, the fake Lestat. Fake Lestat. And she brings him to the bathroom. They did a little loudy. Completely unnecessary scene. Hilarious. An instant. It's a fun sequence, like it's how ridiculous this is. It also goes to showcase the insanity, the cruelty of Gabriella, and we're the stats like, I'm setting these boundaries. Okay, I'll semi-respect those boundaries. So I'm going to get with this guy who looks just like you. And I love the. I'm not sure what Lestat does. He when they come back to the recording session. He blows Yava away. I don't. Is this supposed to be a new power, or is this just more telekinesis and Lestat added his own dramatic flair? Probably the latter. Yeah, Lestat just says "f you." If you want to be with Czech me, you can always go to whatever places you just go to the Czech Republic. I don't need you here. I forgot to talk about. Oh, there was a part where Lestat mentions witches being burnt. Okay. In the novel, Lestat and a bunch of other children were being educated, or got like a field trip with this priest to the spot where the village, and they go to what is called, or what Lestat calls, the witches' place, which is this area where they used to burn the witches. And Lestat has a full-on I don't want to say temper tantrum, because I think this is pretty normal for most children. He has a tantrum where he keeps envisioning the witches. He gets so emotional and distraught, he has to be taken back home. But they upgraded this to where Lestat actually did see women being burnt to death. Now he names 4 women whose names I did not write down, but 2 of them. He mentions there was 4. There was two others and a pair of twins, and the twins' names were very similar to 2 other characters. And Lestat says they were more likely no witches. The twins, they were probably witches, but the other 2, they just probably were caught playing with other things. They're probably being caught playing with things where they should not be caught. Now, the references to witches, though, fun reference to the novel, because in the next novel, The Queen of the Damned, there are a pair of twin witches, and they are very, very important to the story. So I wonder if this is kind of like how they did the Wolf Killer cloak in season 2. I wonder if this is them like, hey, we're just going to mention these witches real quick, just in case we get canceled. Because there was no reference to actual witches present in the Vampire Lestat. He'd always heard of the witches being burnt. All right, so the next scene is probably the most emotional scene of the episode. or we cut back to Lestat and Louis. So back in Detroit, Killer finally makes his appearance, and he and Baby Jinx just got married. We actually see he has a tattoo of her name, which I think vampires could get tattoos, but who do I know? He has a tattoo of her name, and we can't tell if she's been made a vampire yet, because she says, "You're gonna make me a mama tonight." He says, "Doesn't really work like that for us anymore." So maybe she's been made a vampire, but we can't really tell. Like the shots of her eyes, they don't look reflective or unnatural colors. Her nails aren't that sheen, sharp white. So we don't know if she's actually been made yet. And now they get to the house. Louis is waiting in the basement, being all psycho killer. We get to see a little bit of their shrine. We get to see a little bit of their shrine to the Interview with the Vampire novel. There's pages of the novel stapled on the wall. There's this, it looks like there'd be layouts to the hotel building, Louis Hotel. There's his paint or blood on the top says Armand told the truth. So curious on what that means. Even Louis asked that question. He's like, "Oh, see, Gen Z fledglings want to go back to the time of living in the sewers." So maybe there are lots of vampires want to go back to the old traditions, to be the children of Satan, the vampires who serve Satan by serving God, or whoever it was like that in the novel. And now they go down to the basement. Louis is there. He flicks Baby Jinx away with his mind gift, rips a bunch of bones out of Killer's back, which was brutal. And then Louis takes out Claudia's diary, the pages that they were cut out from the last season, detailing her assault by Bruce, Killer, the motherfucker. And I won't go into it because it is very graphic. We don't get to see anything but how Louis reads it, the music. It gets you. It made me shit. I wouldn't say I was crying tears of blood, but it was emotional. And at the same time, we are visiting because at the same time we keep cutting him back and forth to Lestat. He is driving erratically while hallucinating Magnus behind him. And the hallucination Lestat is having seems to be very similar to how Louis hallucinated Lestat in season 2. So I wonder if this is the vampire bond the show keeps mentioning. Because in the novels, they don't really have a special super bond with their maker. So this is very much a show thing. So I wonder if the vampire bond is that when you make somebody, they're the maker's like there's always a part of that person living inside of you. Like maybe it's not fully Magnus's ghost, but a part of Magnus does live on inside Lestat and forever will. And Magnus is like, "Oh, you told lies to the vampire journalists. You weren't fully truthful." And we see the reality of it, not the Taylor Swift super duper romance Lestat made it out to be. We see the reality of Lestat was assaulted. He was beaten and terrified of Magnus. Very much like the novel. Novel is a little different. It's more conflicted emotions, but here it is full on assault. And then they do something with the imagery, because when Louis is describing Claudia, describing how Bruce would hold her down while he did those things. There's odd positioning with Magnus leaning very close to Lestat, on top of Lestat, and that's saying the show is implying that Magnus also did those things to Lestat. Maybe he did, but it is to fully show that, yeah, this is assault. This Lestat did not enjoy becoming a vampire. He may love being a vampire now. He may have been a natural to it, but the actual transformation, the making of it, was nothing beautiful. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't romantic. He wasn't given a choice like he gave Louis or Gabriella. It's a very hard scene to watch and spectacular, and how they sell the pain through all these characters and how they are showcasing that Claudia and Lestat are so much alike, and that's probably one of the reasons why they had a hard time getting along as they did. Well, let's Magnus is being weird. He mentioned something. The long table. Now, if you go back to the final trailer, there was this shot of this long table. Actually, I think there was 2 shots with all these different characters here. And Magnus names them or referenced them. He says, the hand, finger, drummer, pimp, you, mother, Claudia. Of course, Magnus will be at the long table, but look at the other characters. The hand, Nikki. The finger, Antoinette. The drummer, Tough Cookie. The pimp, Louis. Then you, Lestat. Mother, Gabriella. And Claudia. And the look on Lestat's face when Magnus says Claudia. It is so heartbreaking. He is so devastated. It might be finally clicking into him how much he failed Claudia. Which, no, he acknowledged that at the end of season 2, but it's something he's trying to live with, I guess maybe bury down, and having these other people talk about her. It really triggers him, like how he looked at Gabriella last episode, and how Magnus, it's in his head. Even Magnus referencing Claudia, he cannot stand, to the point where Lestat crashes his car. And I do like in the behind the scenes scene, they said they had 2 cuts of this. One where Lestat walks away and looks at the explosion, and one where he doesn't care about the explosion, which they went with the latter. I like to see both. Oh yeah, the interview. The interview was hilarious and emotional, but I do love that Lestat pulled a prank on Daniel. A little mind trick. So apparently after the mentioning of the Great Conversion, Lestat put Daniel in a little hypnosis where, Lestat told the truth. He gave Daniel everything he wanted to hear. He was very upfront with it. It was all a private conversation for the 2 of them. The cameras, his lawyer, the sound people, none of it was caught or saw by anybody else. And Daniel is pissed. I cannot wait to see how that's going to go next episode. But we get to the last scene where Lestat is once again going on about the music, the muses, and how he feels about the music. That while the music may be unleashing all these things inside of him, it may be hurting him, making him feel awful, making him feel like shit. He's also making him feel better. He's able to come up front with all these things that have been reminded of the worst parts of himself. And he can finally acknowledge that, yeah, these things had happened to me. We get to the last song of the episode, The Loneliness. And while not as upbeat and crazy like Your Biggest Fan or Butterscotch Bitch, this song feels the most real compared to all of the other songs, where Lestat is confronting the loneliness of his vampire existence, to not just his vampire existence, but his existence as a whole, his abandonment issues. And as it plays, he has these hallucinations of Nikki and Magnus in the audience, and Gabrielle's there too in reality. As the song goes, as he opens himself up more about his pain, Magnus leaves, and so does Gabriella. But the one person who stays is Nikki. And it's not the crazed Nikki, it's not vampire Nikki, it's mortal Nikki, who looked at Lestat so sweet and lovingly. And that is the only thing Lestat sees and focuses on, and it's a beautiful moment. Especially how they bathe the scene in these blue lights to set the mood. It feels gloomy, but also cathartic, if I'm using that word right. And as that's happening, we cut back to Louis. He's just burned Killer alive, which, yay, motherfucker's dead. He's driving supposedly back home to Detroit or somewhere else, calling Liminal. his vampire lawyer, which we do see they have a photo together on their phone. So I'm guessing their relationship is not just physical, which Louis made it out to be last episode, but Louis travels to a diner, at the same diner he mentioned to Daniel, and we meet Regina, Claudia's lookalike. It wasn't a big shocker because we kind of knew that was going to happen, but the look on Louis' face told us everything. And then the last shot of the episode, while Lestat is singing the song, he begins to fly. He levitates a couple feet off the ground. We see a little bit of this in the opening, actually. But Lestat is levitating, and we cut to people's recording of him floating. People are like, "Oh my God, is he actually flying?" We cut to the reactions to the band members, and this is it. Is this Lestat finally revealing his vampire nature to the world? No small tricks, no little, oh, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. No, Lestat just doesn't care right now. If he is going to be himself, unabashful, beautiful, violent, and monstrous, also kind, he's gonna show it out to the world. No more, oh, am or am I not a vampire? No, I am a vampire. I am the vampire Lestat. I am real, and here I am. This was an awesome episode. This was a fantastic episode. This is my favorite episode of the show so far. The other 2 seasons, this is right up there with episode 5 of season 2. Also, real quick, I want to get into power scaling. The power scaling in the episode or in the show so far, is kind of all over the place. Now, going to the novels power scaling is also kind of iffy. So, like in the novel, when you become a vampire, you get, the basics: super strength, speed, regeneration, immortality, super duper senses. But also, it's kind of weird though, because in the strength factor, when he is first made a vampire, he states his strength was something akin to 4 to 5 men, if I remember correctly. And clearly he does more impressive things than just 4 and 5 men can do throughout the novel, at least in those first few months when he into his immortal life. Especially when he shows that he can beat Armand. Like, okay, the other vampires and the other coven members probably, but Armand, the 500-year-old dark god of the blood, this is right there. And of course, the set gets a power up when he drinks the blood of Marius and the blood of Akasha. But he's not super duper powerful. Like, he's more indestructible, he's more immortal. Fire and the sun doesn't affect him like that, but he's not that much stronger. He doesn't get any other powers. Lestat doesn't get any powers until he drinks from Akasha the second time. But what about Louis in the novel? Louis in the novel is shown to be super weak, even though he's made into a vampire by Lestat after he drinks from Akasha. And Louis doesn't get any mind reading abilities till like near the end of the book series. Kind of weird. And like most vampires, like the basic bitch vampires, don't get any special powers until like they're like 1,000 years old. In the novel, The Vampire Lestat, Armand remembers when he is being taught by the vampire Seminole, I need to look at the name again. One of the Roman leaders. And they start talking about basically vampire eugenics. Like, only a vampire of a certain age can make another vampire. If you are too old as a vampire, you cannot make any other vampires, because the older and stronger a vampire, the stronger the fledgling's going to be. Okay? Makes sense. Then they also say, oh, if you never make another vampire, your blood is particularly stronger. So the next vampire you make is going to be super strong as well. Okay, I guess that kind of makes sense. And then they just say that for unknown reasons, sometimes when a person is made a vampire, they're just super duper at it. They are natural to it. They're strong and faster, despite how strong and fast their maker was. Okay, so basically, it's whatever Anne Rice kind of wants it to be. Not trying to be mean about it, but that's what it kind of seems like. Now in the show, though, The show does seem pretty consistent with the vampire lineage because Marius, a 2,000-year-old vampire, it makes sense that his child Armand would be super powerful. And then you get to Lestat. He was made by Magnus, 300 years old and strong. He drank the blood of Marius and Akasha, so it makes sense he would be super strong. And then he makes Louis. Okay, Louis has Lestat's blood, which also is the blood of those other three people. It makes sense why Louis so strong. So I get why our three top dogs in the show have all these extra powers. But then you get to the basic vampires, they have mind reading. Then you get to these other vampires who we don't know the real history of, like in the Talamasca show, the vampire, what's his name, that William Fichtner played, he has the time stop power. I'm sorry, you're younger than Luke. Who is your maker? Like, the power levels are all over the place in the show, which I wouldn't mind if they just made sure that the weaknesses were still intact, because fire seems pretty inconsistent in how dangerous it is. So with sunlight, which still seem like greater threats to our characters instead of minor inconveniences. But yeah, that's been episode 3. Fantastical watch. And once again, while I am slightly disappointed that it's not as close to the book as I was hoping for it to be, I'm still having a fantastic time with the show, and I want to see it to the end. Alright, gotta go. Been recording for an hour. See y'all in the next video, which might be reaction instead of just a podcast. So take care, all the beautiful unwells.